Since Ninja Gaiden/Gaiden introduced the world to movie-like cutscenes, video games have aimed to become more cinematic. And if you split the word cinematic in half, what do you get? Matic. Wait, no, cinema. That's the one. Whether it be the way in which they tell their story, their visual cinematography, or even the basic elements of plot, cinema has been a big influence on the video game world. However, some game studios may have taken a bit more than inspiration from certain films. They've taken their entire premise, and we're spotlighting those today. With this list, we're looking at direct lifts from films rather than homages. As such, you won't see us outlining the parallels between Uncharted 3 and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, or Silent Hill and Jacob's Ladder. No, what you're going to see here is a little more direct and a lot less subtle. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 games that stole their premise from movies. Number 10. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, 2017, and Battle Royale, 2000. The Japanese thriller Battle Royale centers around a group of school kids who are forced by the government to fight to the death on a remote island until only one is left. Pretty simple. The film has become a cult classic and a controversial one. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or PUBG to its friends, took the idea of a free-for-all killing spree on an island and, well, that's it. It took the idea and made that the game. PUBG borrowed the very soul of its movie inspiration, even down to the concept of a playing field which shrinks over time. PUBG is so strongly reminiscent of the Battle Royale film that Battle Royale became the name of a new video game genre. There's thieving, then there's naming the thing you stole after the people you stole it from. Gutsy move, PlayerUnknown, if that is your real name. Number 9. Extermination, 2001, and The Thing, 1982. Who here has played the PS2 survival horror game Extermination? One or two of you at the back there? Alright, well, for the rest of you, if you've watched The Thing and played Resident Evil, you've also basically played Extermination. Plot-wise, a group of Americans are investigating a research facility in Antarctica. They discover that everyone there is dead. The cause is a viral infection inflicting severe mutations on the host. The crew now has to survive against this microbial threat. It ends in a fight against a giant version of the mutant strain. Is that the plot of The Thing or the plot of Extermination? Well, it's both. The biggest difference between the two is the enemy itself. The Thing is stealthier in who it infects. As anyone could be infected, it becomes quite tense. Extermination handles its virus with a little less subtlety, being more like your usual zombie transformation after contact takes place. The Thing is tailor-made for a survival horror experience, so it makes sense that developers would want to give it a go. Official license be damned. In fact, it's a wonder that there wasn't an official Thing game. Oh, there was? It was meant as a sequel to the film and released a year after Extermination, and it's basically the same thing. Oh, better slightly late than never. Number 8. Rampage, 1986, and 20 Million Miles to Earth, 1957. 1986's giant animal smash-em-up Rampage features a few cinematic burgles. Perhaps the most obvious is George, the giant gorilla smashing his way through a city. I think we can all agree that the comparison with the most royal of all Kongs is undeniable. Aircraft even shoots at our simian friend as he climbs buildings. Now, where have I seen that before? King Kong is a bit too obvious for us though, so we're spotlighting instead the giant lizard Lizzie, who is clearly a reference to Godzilla, right? Not right. Wrong, in fact. Lizzie is actually lifted from 1957's giant animal smash-em-up 20 Million Miles to Earth. One of the main indications is the fact that Godzilla's stumpy little arms would be fairly useless in a game about manually demolishing buildings. Lizzie's design is based on the 20 Million Miles creature borrowing its longer and stronger limbs. Look at it go. Rampage itself was eventually turned into a movie in 2018, bringing the theft full circle 61 years later. It's like poetry. Very mediocre poetry, with The Rock in it. Number 7. KILLERBALL, 1989, and ROLLERBALL, 1975. I don't fully understand the rules of Rollerball, the fictional, violent sport created for the 1975 film of the same name. As far as I understand, you skate around a circular track and try to throw a ball into a small goal, all while opposing skaters are trying to batter you to death. It's basically a mix of roller derby, American football, and being battered to death. Also, people scoot around on motorbikes just to make things more confusing. The mere existence of the game in the film was meant to shock and unnerve viewers, so of course somebody decided to bring it into our homes in video game form. KILLERBALL is Rollerball. It's exactly Rollerball, with the only difference being a lack of motorbikes. They even copied the aesthetic of Rollerball. It's amazing that they got away with it, as it's brazen even when compared to the other acts of thievery on this list. What's more, KILLERBALL isn't the only Rollerball copycat. Rocketball was an even earlier attempt at mimicking the fictional game. This one even lifted the team names from the film. Then there's Roller Champions from Ubisoft. Again though, still no motorbikes. Maybe that's all it takes to get past Rollerball's copyright lawyers? Number 6. Freedom Fighters, 2003, and Red Dawn, 1984. In Red Dawn, Soviet forces invade the States and take over as a full occupying force. A group of teenagers come together as a small guerrilla resistance unit. They fight back against the Soviets with all they can get their hands on in an attempt to save their town. It ends in a temporary, solemn victory as they escape into the wilderness, knowing in their hearts that the war is far from over. Now, for Freedom Fighters, take everything I just said, pretend it takes place in New York, and age the characters up a bit. Instant video game. Stolen story aside, 2003's IO Interactive developed Freedom Fighters is actually a good game. It's a third-person shooter in which you control your own squad of fighters. There's a big focus on taking over, controlling, and holding bases, especially in the exceptional multiplayer versus mode. It's a gameplay style that suits the plot too. As a game, it's clever and rather unique. It just so happens that its plot definitely isn't. Number 5. S.O.S, 1993, and The Poseidon Adventure, 1972. In both S.O.S and The Poseidon Adventure, the action stems from the meeting between one ship and a giant wave. Similar, but it isn't going to get anyone running to their attorneys. The more significant similarity, though, is that the survivors in both works then have to team up to escape through a ship that is upside down. The characters in each have their own specific abilities that help them navigate the constantly sinking, capsizing vessel. They work their way through rooms and areas that were clearly not designed to have people walking on the ceiling. What a lack of foresight! For its time, the film was an impressive visual spectacle involving a fully rotating set. S.O.S was a similar spectacle of its time. The team at Human Entertainment attempted a cinematic style of storytelling back on the SNES. Its other main selling point was that the whole game would rotate along with the ship they were trapped in. This meant that some areas were far easier or far more difficult to progress through as the ship yawed and pitched at different angles. The game even got an equally flagrant sequel on the PlayStation called Septentrion Out of the Blue. It may possibly be the slowest paced thing in human history. Number 4. Snatcher, 1988, and Blade Runner, 1982. Considering that Hideo Kojima is one of the pioneers of cinematic video games with Metal Gear Solid, it only makes sense that he plucked a few ideas from elsewhere. However, he may have taken a bit too much from one certain film. 1982's Blade Runner is set in the dystopian cyberpunk future of 2019, so they had predicted the dystopian part anyway. There are flying cars, androids, and Harrison Ford. What's not to like? Well, Kojima liked it so much that he essentially made his own fan game. Snatcher shares a very similar design to Blade Runner in pretty much every regard, just with a bit less rain. The protagonist even has a similar coat. In fairness though, it is a very nice coat. They share a plot too, of course. Replicants are hiding amongst normal humans and you are tasked with hunting them down. Snatcher is considered a classic, and rightly so. It shares uncomfortable similarities with somebody else's work, but that doesn't make it bad, and it's a good showing of early Kojima establishing his style. For instance, he was apparently asked to cut more than half of his original script as it was far too long. That's the Kojima we know and love. Sometimes. Number 3. CARMAGEDDON, 1997, and Death Race 2000, 1975. The plots of both CARMAGEDDON and Death Race 2000 center around a violent race in which drivers get bonus points for killing pedestrians. As we discussed with Rollerball and Battle Royale, there's no avoiding the fact that the developers lifted somebody else's concept wholesale. The difference though is that this time there was a reason. During development, CARMAGEDDON was actually a licensed death race game. Specifically, it was meant to tie into an upcoming sequel. The sequel was ultimately cancelled, but studio Stainless Games decided to keep going with the game anyway, simply changing the name. CARMAGEDDON is clearly Death Race 2000 the game, and it makes little attempt to hide it. Patient Death Race fans eventually did get a film sequel in 2017 called Death Race 2050. It did not get a CARMAGEDDON tie-in. Not yet, at least. There's no telling what the future will bring. Actually, wait, this is the future, and nobody is making more Death Race or CARMAGEDDON. Sorry, everyone. Number 2. Dead Rising, 2006, and Dawn of the Dead, 1978. If there were a zombie outbreak tomorrow, where would you go? It's the question many a moviegoer has been asking themselves for decades now. A rural farm? A sturdy church? To the Winchester for a nice cold pint and wait for it all to blow over? There are plenty of options. The idea of hiding out in a shopping mall was either a stroke of genius for the makers of Dead Rising, or, more likely, they just took the idea from zombie godfather himself, George Romero. The plot of Dawn of the Dead and Dead Rising are largely similar. They both involve survivors hiding out in a mall, raiding the various shops for their goods. Both involve the once secure shopping centre being overrun by zombies after the barricades are breached. One case being down to a biker gang, and the other to a pensioner who really likes dogs. Characters in both even escape the mall via helicopter. Not now, Otis! He always calls it the worst time. Anyway, Dawn of the Dead's copyright holders had a go at suing Capcom, albeit unsuccessfully, and before the lawsuit took place, Capcom included the phrase, "This game was not developed, approved, or licensed by the owners or creators of George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead," right there on the front cover, so they were well aware of the similarities between the two. In fact, it's bugger off, Otis. I don't care if someone needs saving, I'm busy suplexing zombies. Number 1. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, 2002, and Scarface, 1983. Over the years, Rockstar has taken plenty of inspiration from well-known mafia and cop movies, primarily Heat, which is fine. However, their most prominent comparison is one bordering on outright theft. Scarface tells the tale of Tony Montana, an ex-convict released on the condition that he goes to Miami to carry out a specific task. After getting there, he starts to work up through the criminal underworld until he eventually runs the drug trade in the city. He also kills his former boss for betraying him. Vice City, on the other hand, tells the tale of Tommy Vercetti, an ex-convict who is released from prison and sent by his boss to Vice City, Rockstar's version of Miami, to carry out a specific task. He starts to work his way up through the criminal underworld until he eventually runs the city's drug trade. He also kills his former boss for betraying him. It may sound like I basically just said the same thing twice, but that's the point. There's no getting away from it. Vice City is Scarface in video game form. The two characters share a taste for Hawaiian shirts, there's a similar mansion design, and there's even an Easter egg reference to the apartment chainsaw scene. Clearly, they weren't trying to be subtle about stealing the plot of Scarface. You've almost got to applaud their honesty. The only real difference is that, in the end, Tony Montana dies while Tommy Vercetti survives, though if Vice City were more linear, you could bet it would have ended the exact same way. Still, it's a great game. Here's to GTA 6 for being a blatant retelling of Pulp Fiction.